Greetings, Lazarus, from the Yucatan, Quintana Roo in Mexico, where I'm based for the next couple of weeks. And certainly I'll be anchoring the Lazarus Symposium from here and in one of our office spaces of the New Earth Sanctuary. Very happy today to be bringing on board a beloved man who I've known for some years, have enormous respect for. And this is Spirit Ways versus Dragon Ways, a bit of an enigmatic title, and you'll understand that that this man goes into some extraordinary depth. I rather prefer the title Dragonblood. We're talking about the subtle, subdimensional, hyperdimensional aspects and elements which run in our blood and which inform and to some great extent define and determine our psycho-emotional, psycho-intellectual reality. How is it that we project into the world in certain ways? How is it that some of us are neurotic or hysterical? Or how is it that we can contain our emotional body, our psychic body, and thereby define spiritual orientation? This is more or less the sort of abstract arena of focus here with Dr. Dean Allen, who I welcome to the Lazarus Initiative. He received his PhD in clinical psychology from Utah State University, where he discovered how to scientifically connect mind and body functions, which is described in his very brilliant dissertation entitled Autonomous Nervous System Control as a Function of Imagery, using biofeedback measurements, graciously inspired by Dr. Elmer Green's biofeedback research, which is landmark pioneering research. And Dr. Allen's work in emotional science for the past 30 plus years culminated in the book, Know Thyself, Your Body's Wisdom for Living Consciously. So let me welcome Dr. Dean Allen. Good to see you, brother.
Thank you, Sacha.
Now, Dr. Allen, your work has boiled down the essence of integrated health as an infrared science that tracks life force, organ, gland, emotional energy flow, a process that decodes a person's energy flow patterns with the body's innate organ and gland language, revealing one's conscious solutions to their unconscious problems. And your focus on how processing change determines stress, and that stress ultimately kills living systems if they cannot process the changes in their life clearly and quickly. So in a sense, given the back end of the COVIDiacy and the fact that we are planetarily right dead center in the middle of the Great Tribulation, actually your life's work is only now going to find its real attraction. Tell us about what led you to this noble work.
Well, I started with my PhD, and what I had set in mind when I got started on that was to make a scientific connection between the mind and the body. And that sounded very simple at the time, but the only science that was available to do that at that time was biofeedback. So I did my research in biofeedback. And the more I got into it, of course, the more details and the less simple it became. So I worked with that through my dissertation, and about 5 years afterwards, working with the Times Publishing Company, doing wellness and stress management. And at the end of that, I could see that biofeedback was not going to give me the kind of details that I needed in order to psychologically understand who humans are and how they function energetically. And without that, I don't know how you even get started on the game, because the only vehicle you have to play this game of life is your body and your 23 organs and glands. And each one of those organs and glands has a very specific purpose, plan, function, issue, and trauma. And once you learn that language and then can do an individual measurement of a person and put together what their physical, emotional, mental, and spirit life force energy functions are doing in their life, you can connect a lot of dots. And at that point, you can really see who you are and how you function.
Okay. So underscore, what are emotions and why are they so important?
Well, first of all, let's just start with the word emotion. What it is energy motion. And when energy is in motion, it regenerates the system. When energy is blocked from flowing in motion, in other words, every organ and gland is designed to do two things: perceive and express. And what blocks that is trauma memory, which is triggered by association. So anything that happens in the present is automatically and usually unconsciously associated with a memory of the past. If that is a trauma memory that creates fear, the response is to block that perception and expression. And when you do that over time, it creates degeneration, dysfunction, disorder, disease, death, and dying. All D words from drag on spirit, life, force, energy flow. And that's the primary human problem right there.
Very good. Beautifully stated. What is the emotional purpose, plan, function, issue, and trauma of the organs and glands?
Okay, what emotions are basically feelings, and every organ and gland has a very specific feeling for a very specific purpose. And the way God set it up is so that we could feel and perceive and express spontaneously. And that happens automatically unless there's a triggered memory in there that says, no, that's not safe. And when that happens, you distort perception and you suppress expression. And therein lies the origin of most problems.
Okay. And then how does, this is also underscoring, how does trauma memory relate to organ and gland functions and manifestation of disease in particular?
Well, it creates fear. And as soon as you create fear, the response is to hold back rather than express forward. And the measurement that I take is between every organ and gland in the body and every other organ and gland in the body. And when you do the two-way permutations of 23 organs and glands, you get 253 circuits. So those are all the two-way circuits between every organ and gland and every other organ and gland. And when you measure that, you identify certain circuits that are blocked over time. Now, doing one scan on one day and having a blocked circuit doesn't really mean anything. But when you do these measurements over time, you get to see which circuits are stuck. And those circuits, when they're stuck over time, result in disease, disorder, dysfunction, degeneration.
Okay, so let's break it down. As ever, everything, alpha and omega, within this realm of duality, breaks down at a fractal, scalar, torsion, and then fractal level to you here in the now. And the degree to which you here in the now, as the living sentient being, is moving either by will into expansion or into contraction, into entropy or into neg entropy. You are choosing to align in the now to frequency X and above, which is the love spectrum, or frequency X and below, which is the sphere spectrum. So it's everything always comes down. The litmus is always you in the living moment and the degree to which you are actualized in the living moment. Correct? Speak a little about that.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's what I call a moment of power. And the moment of power is 1 second after anything that happens in your life. Within that 1 second, if you're not conscious enough to observe the triggered memory, whatever it may be, and ask yourself, does this triggered memory apply to what's going on in the present, or is it just an association that doesn't apply? That's why consciousness is the only elegant solution to human problems, because only by being conscious enough in that 1 second following anything that happens in your life can you have control. Otherwise, the dragon takes over with the triggered projected memory that is associated with whatever's going on in your present.
Okay, so let's look at this. So the dragon is, the utility of the dragon becomes the false light memory aspect, which is the codified experience, memory, all of that, all of which is dead, no longer exists. It's in the past, or it's an idea that's projected into the future. It's false light images projected either in the past or in the future. When in a state of conscious actualization, we recognize the sheer folly of looking over the shoulder or peering through the glass darkly, as opposed to being alert, alive, fully present in the now. It always comes back to this. And that, in a sense, Dean, excuse this noise of Mexican trucks there, that, in a sense, is the Rubicon, is it not? That's the true Rubicon. But it's also where the Grail, the Holy Grail, exists.
Right. Yeah, that's really the like I said, the moment of power, because you either have the moment to make a conscious decision at that point, or the unconscious trigger projected memory takes over and you live the present as if it was an exact duplicate of the trauma memory that is being projected onto whatever's going on in your present.
Very good, very good. So we're all, in that sense, walking through the valley of death. This is a metaphor that I've been using for the last couple of years because it's the most appropriate metaphor. Each of us walking through that valley of death are required for pure survivalism to reestablish communion or relationship with self, the greater self, in this valley of death. It is a perfect traction. COVID, in that sense, the satanic bedevilment of what we're living through civilizationally, in that sense, becomes the greatest gift to ourselves. We are collectively projecting this insane dystopian reality into the field, which projects back at us with these gibbering archetypes of Joseph Biden and Capitol Hill and Bill Gates, wandering around the world stage. All of these archetypes are serving us, creating the traction against which we define our relevancy and our consciousness, correct?
Right. Well, and it's all a question of being able to discern quickly whether the triggered memory applies to what's going on in the present, and you want to consider it and learn from it, or if you determine that it is not relevant and that you need to go on. Otherwise, if you don't do that, what happens is the person is off on another reality that whoever they're interacting with isn't going to know what's going on because it doesn't relate to what's going on in the present.
Right.
And
the death, what I call the death spiral mechanics, kicks in at that point, because you are not anchoring your immanent template or patterns of perfection into this realm. Therefore, you're offering your life force, your prana, up as a utility of the egregore, the demonic realms, the lower astral realms, the flotsam and jetsam in the astral realms. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Now, one of the other things that I should talk about is why did God create the dragon? And God had a very good reason for creating the dragon. And because what I tell people is thank God for the dragon, because if there were no dragons, there would be no humans, because nobody would have ever survived. The
Right.
reason that God created the dragon was to immediately establish homeostasis in the moment of trauma, because you can only be out of homeostasis for a few seconds or minutes at the very most, or you're dead. So God gave us the dragon as a short-term emergency survival mechanism that allows us to establish homeostasis almost immediately and live. But the problem is when you make that short-term emergency survival a lifestyle,
Right.
now you're in big trouble.
Okay.
Because
Got it.
it becomes familiar, and you do what's familiar most easily and repeat it over and over. And then if it's reinforced by your environment, you're off on a path that is not related to reality.
Well, it's destructive, and that's where we get into addictions and appetite and start getting led by the
Right.
lower elementals and the lower cities, so to speak, that are whispering at
Right.
all times, seeking to interpose themselves into our spiritual orientation. Very good. Okay, so let's speak about the moment of power following any experience. Describe the moment of power following any experience.
Well, it's an immediate projected associated memory. In other words, the memory is associated with whatever's going on in the present. That's the way the brain is wired. And you have to decide consciously whether that memory applies to what's going on in the present or not. And you have to do that within 1 second, because the dragon is very fast. And if you're not conscious enough to get ahead of it, you're going to be behind it.
Very good. I love it. Thank you. Beautiful. Let's talk a little bit, because we're talking about dragons here. And of course, on the one hand, we're speaking metaphorically, but on the other hand, we're speaking epigenetically, and we're speaking in terms of true mythos, which informs our reality. So, what, who, where, when, and why was and is the dragon phenomenon as it relates to human genetics in our cosmogenetic story?
Well, it's all memory. The symbol of the dragon seems to go back as far as human history. There's dragons in the caves of the most ancient discoveries of past human life. And so this has been a phenomena that has been consciously aware of humans almost from the beginning. And when I first got started in this, basically what I did is, I was in LA at the time, and I went to the Bodhi tree and read every book I could find on the dragon. And what I discovered is that in Chinese history, there's basically 3 levels to the dragon. And those 3 levels are the dragon in the cave, the dragon in the lake, and the dragon in the sky. And those 3 levels show the the development, the evolution of the dragon. And the rule is you don't go into the dragon's home, which is the cave, because if you do, you will lose. So the dragon's home is the cave. Now the question then becomes, if you can't go in, how do you get the dragon out of the cave? And the way you get the dragon out of the cave is with love and light. And it has to be the right dose at the right time, or it won't work. And what love does, dragons love love, but they hate light, because light is the truth. So you have to do a kind of a dance with that. Love to get the dragon to move forward, light to discipline the dragon so that it doesn't get off on a dark path. And so that is the second stage, the dragon in the lake. And basically what the dragon in the lake is where the lake is water, which is emotion, And what the motion is emotional memory. And so that's what we call the fourth dimension. And the fourth dimension is time. And in terms of humans, it's memory of time.
Yes.
So that's what the fourth dimension is. And you can't get to the fifth dimension until you get through the fourth dimension, because the fourth dimension is triggered to take you into all of those memories. And if you're not conscious enough to get ahead of them, you're going to be behind them, and you're going to follow that path. So once you can get through all of your triggered memories so that they're not controlling your life, that takes you into the dragon in the sky. And the symbol of the dragon in the sky is the Buddha meditating on the back of a sleeping dragon. And the message there is the dragon does nothing except what the Buddha tells it to do. And otherwise it just sleeps. But when the Buddha directs the dragon, watch out.
Very good.
So in other words, consciously.
Okay, I love it. And this this beautiful navigation set that you've just described, the cave, the lake, the sky, is that codified in any of the ancient sort of esoteric wisdom traditions like I Ching and so on?
Yeah, Chinese astrology is filled with that. So it's where it originated.
Okay, so cave, lake, sky. And sky ultimately is the transmutative, the transcendent.
Well, it's when the dragon gives up its power to the Buddha, because at that point, the dragon realizes it's blind.
Right.
And turns over its power to the Buddha, or the spirit, which is has foresight. The primary thing the dragon lacks is foresight.
Yes.
And of course, since it's a survival mechanism, God saw no reason for the dragon to have foresight, because its primary function is survival in the moment.
Right.
Of life-threatening situations. That's the dragon's primary function. And it does very well at that. But when it's given more control over your life than emergency survival from life-threatening situations, then you're in trouble.
So an experience I had many years ago, Dean, which I've only spoken to, I think once, maybe twice, in a more public forum, was the turning point of my life when I encountered in broad daylight in the middle of an afternoon, through the agency of what turned out to be a witch, a woman who had come, solicited a meeting with me for some time. Finally, I'd agreed to it, and she came ostensibly to interview me in the middle of an afternoon in London, broad daylight, sunny afternoon. And when she came in, and she'd come in from Italy, and been really soliciting my management, my agent, to get to meet with me. So it was strange how that had been set up. But when she did come in and we sat down and began to engage, some curious thing occurred at a moment when she went into a kind of seizure and turned kind of catatonic, and just stared at the ground and stopped speaking and froze. And I was looking at her like, is this some sort of a joke, or was she having a conniption? I couldn't work it out in my brain. And at the next moment, I felt something to my right turned, and there was a dragon fully manifested and about to ostensibly tear me to shreds. And this creature was so visceral, so real. It must have been 13 or 14 feet high, but it was crowded down. It was crouched down into the room. The only way out of the room would have been to bypass the dragon and get to the door behind it, or throw myself out of one of the windows. But I'd have to go through it either way, because I was cornered. And what happened in that moment in time, Dean, was I was so shocked. My whole body went into obviously a state of siege, of abject terror. And the way that my brain worked, I could still see her, because time slowed down, as it does in life and death situations. And so I was able to calibrate certain things. She was still catatonic and staring at the ground and not there. I worked out
Mhm.
in my brain that she was a conduit for this manifestation. Nonetheless, my body wanted to escape the clear existential threat of death. So I threw myself into a concrete wall, my brain thinking I stood more chance of surviving, pushing my molecules through concrete than passing this dragon to get to the door. Now, as I hit the wall and concussed myself, it knocked some momentary sense into me. And in that moment, I had to summon every aspect of who I was into one living moment, or
Mhm.
face extinction, or certainly,
Right.
be devoured. I
Right.
don't know what was going to happen. But that summoning of everything into the now is what you just spoke about, that the dragon
Right.
represents the living moment. And it was because of that that I summoned my
Yeah.
full Atman sensibilities into the mortal realm. And what I was
Right.
left with was my only route of survival in that moment was to fully acknowledge the dragon. So I turned to it. It was now 2 foot away. Its glowering
Right.
yellow eyes and its face was only
Right.
2 foot away. But in that moment, I saw a third eye in the creature. And what I did was instantly surrendered to the living moment and acknowledged that that dragon was a living embodiment of the sum total of all of the unresolved aspects of my soul's journey, all
Yep.
in one
Yep.
perfect moment. And in that
Right.
recognition, I became all powerful. This creature disappeared out of the holonomic field. She
Right.
took a deep intake of air, the woman, and came out of her catatonic state. And I was obviously in a state of absolute panic, but I'd won the
Wow.
moment. I did grab her by the throat and I threw her out of my home, and chalk that one down to experience. But everything that you've just said to me
Mhm.
makes absolute sense. Does what
Yeah.
I just said
Absolutely.
sound mad to you?
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. And basically, the way I would describe that, and different people have different experiences in
Yes.
that kind of a situation. And what I have come to learn or observe or believe is that the only ones that really make that kind of experience that you did is what I call strong spirits. Because if your spirit isn't strong enough to face the truth in those moments, you will go the other direction.
Yes.
And I think that's the primary divider of humans is strong spirits and not so strong. Because
Right.
if you don't have a strong spirit, you can't follow the truth as easily as strong spirits. They don't even have a choice. They can't not follow the spirit because they're so in tune to that energy that it drives them crazy. So
Beautiful.
they're basically forced to follow the spirit.
Yeah, understood. Understood. What are the laws and ways of spirit life force versus the laws and ways of drag on spirit life force, so to speak?
Well, basically, I had to kind of make this part up so that I could work with clients and make sense to them. And what I've come up with is the 5 words that define the dragon and 2 words that define the spirit. And the 5 words, the first word is confusion. And dragons promote confusion. And the most graphic example of that is William Casey's quote, who was a CIA director, said that when what Americans believe is all false, the CIA will have accomplished its job. And that is the promotion of confusion. And once you've got people confused, then they're easier to deceive. And that's the second power of the dragon, confusion and deception. And once you've got them confused and deceived, then they're easier to manipulate. That's the third power of the dragon. And if they're not being manipulated far enough, fast enough for the dragon's liking, then you use the last 2 powers, which are fear and force. So the 5 powers of the dragon are confusion, deception, manipulation, fear, and force. And anytime you see that happening behaviorally in people that you're interacting with, you know who you're dealing with. You're not dealing with spirit. You're dealing with a dragon that is projecting those particular behaviors. Now, the two powers of the spirit are love and light. And basically, it's love of light, and light is truth. And the only truth there is the laws and ways of energy, because everything is energy, and every organ and gland has specific laws and ways that it is designed to function in order to regenerate, or if it's blocked and suppressed, then that's how it degenerates. So every organ and gland has that language within it. And once you learn that language, then you can begin to understand who you are and how you function.
Fantastic.
Because this is basic. Yeah, this is the keys to the kingdom right here.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, break it down again. How does the infrared organ and gland emotional science raise consciousness and clarify confusion? Just break that down.
Okay, so basically what infrared does is measure the density of electrons. And the density of electrons translates to heat. Heat translates to degeneration and dysfunction, disorder, disease, death, and dying, all of those. So what infrared measures is the density of electrons on 23 points on the face, and each of those points is what is called a force vector point or a junction point, where 3 or 4 specific organs flow through each of those points. And each organ is connected to 3 or 4 points on the face. So what you have is a matrix. And of course, the body is filled with matrices, but the face is the one that I use for psychological reasons, because the face is how you face life. And that's what we're reading off of those measurements, is how you face life. And basically what this whole system does is allow your body to talk to you about your life. And I used to do health fairs, and I had a big sign behind me that said, "What would your body tell you about your life?" And I would watch the people walking down the aisle and reading this sign over my head. And there were 2 very distinct responses to that. One was they'd look at it and they'd read it and they'd start moving closer to me. And then they'd come over and ask questions. The other one, they'd start reading it and they got to it and they'd look the other way and speed up and go away. Now, that's the difference between a spirit and a dragon right there.
Beautiful.
The spirits are seeking truth. The dragons don't want to know.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Now, you are also here today to talk to us about what you see from your path, and you've had an extraordinary path, as the main challenge facing humanity and human consciousness. Speak about that.
Well, basically, the only elegant solution to human problems is consciousness. And the reason is because only consciousness allows you to make conscious decisions, and only conscious decisions are regenerative over time. And so consciousness is the ultimate goal. In order to do that, basically, it's an individual trip, because everybody has their own path, their own history, their own memories. And that's what they've got to get through, because if they don't get through that 4th dimension, which is where all of those triggered memories are, and what you described in your experience, it was exactly what happened right there.
Right.
But see, that's why I say only strong spirits have the strength to do that, and the others go the other direction, and then they have to deal with that later.
Right. So I love what you've just said. Conscious decisions are the only ones that are regenerative over time, which is to say, become codified. I mean, through these great epochal galactic time, so-called time cycles that we move through, like the grand procession of the equinox and the blah, blah, blah. I mean, as we move through the firmament, the collective is also dreaming. And the collective is also leaving the imprints of conscious decisions or memories into the field. And 26,000 years later, when it comes full circle and we are moved through that same part of the ecliptic, that's when we start to collectively have this revelation, this awakening, like we've been here before. And that's what it is it not? So what you've just said, the conscious decisions that we made collectively are the ones that have value, that have any validity, that become part of the immanent template, which can help on our eternal path towards ever heightened states of regenesis, resurrection, and salvation. I love it. Beautiful. Conscious decisions are the regenerative ones over time. Makes so much sense to me. What is the current critical collision between technology and sufficient consciousness, and how do we use it for positive regeneration instead of negative control?
Well, the probably the biggest thing that humanity's facing right now is is how they deal with AI. AI is it aligns with what I call the corporate mentality, and the corporate mentality basically takes advantage of all of God's mentality, which is the 4 pairs of lobes of the brain, which is 80% of the brain. And those 4 functions, I think, were given to us for good reasons, but they are basically seeing, understanding, feeling, and doing. And so those are the 4 pairs of lobes. And the seeing is getting the bigger picture. The understanding is the linear detail. Both of those are abstract. And then we get into the non-abstract, which is the feeling. Feeling is basically there to give us morality. And without feeling, there is no morality. And that's the corporate mentality. They leave that part out because it's very inefficient to take into consideration what people are feeling.
Wow.
And it affects the bottom line.
Doing.
And the corporations are not interested in anything that interferes with the bottom line. Well, corporate mentality and dragon mentality are almost identical.
Right. And that's how this fucking grotesquerie called government and the Catholic Church emerged in answer to this draconian dragnet, right?
Right.
Which made use of the utility of the life force, the abnegated life force of the collective becomes the utility of that dragnet, which accretes, which phenomenologically accretes into false light reality, which becomes humankind's indentureship to idolatry, to false light, to the Catholic Church, to monotheistic bullshit, and to thereby to government by extension, which of course becomes a self-fulfilling, self-revealing feedback loop of death and destructivity and entropy. Karma, reincarnation, rinse cycle, rinse cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah. God, aren't we tired of that rinse cycle?
Well, we're finally at a point where we're moving through the photon belt, and it appears what the photon belt is doing, that's to increase the density of light. And the Genome Project identified 97% of the DNA as junk. Mm-hmm. And it appears that junk DNA is being activated by the density of light, which is causing humans to process more information more clearly and more quickly. And dark games don't fly in the light. And that's why we're in chaos, which is the definition of Armageddon, which is is revealed by the light.
Are you saying that Hillary Clinton's evil doing is actually being revealed and exposed? To take an example?
Hers and everyone else's that's following the dragon path. And the dragon path is always about control. And the reason it's always about control is because the dragon philosophy is you don't trust anybody, anytime, about anything, ever, period.
Which curiously enough, is where insurance comes in and reinsurance,
Yeah.
which is the
Yeah.
backbone and the mainstay of our satanic economy and our model. It's all based on
Right.
trying to insure against what the
Right.
outcome, correct?
Right. Right. And see, with that philosophy of not trusting anybody anytime about anything, the only way the dragon has any security is by control.
Mm.
And that's why all dragon motives are focused on control. Because if you don't trust anybody, you have to try and control everybody.
Okay, so you're faced with a dragon, Dean. How do you deal with the dragon? How do you muster and then deal with the dragon head on? And I'm talking about the worst aspect of a dragon, which ultimately is going to be a manifestation in the field of a creature which can actually devour you and eviscerate you. But or it could be dealing with a Saturnian judge in a courtroom, or some heinous corrupt policeman in the precinct at 2 o'clock in the morning when no one's looking. I mean, this evil can meet us in any way, shape, or form through the labyrinthine apparatus of technocracy and bureaucracy. And God knows every good human being gets tripped up into that in the course of their life.
Right.
How do we deal with that dragon element when it's in front of us?
Okay, the first thing that I found that you almost have to have is you have to understand what the game is. You can't win a game when you don't even understand how it works. And so the first step is understanding who you are and how you function energetically. And if you don't do that, I think you're at a tremendous disadvantage because you don't even know what's going on. And there's no way to figure it out because you don't know what the game's about. And so the first step is to figure out who you are and how you function. Now, that's what the scan and the infrared measurement does. It doesn't answer all the questions, but it gives you a clear model map of who you are and how you function energetically. And then you figure out the rest one step at a time. But when you're faced with the dragon in those kind of situations that you're talking about, the best thing to do in that moment and that's assuming that you have a strong enough spirit and a strong enough consciousness to do it, is to take a deep breath and be able to process what's going on more clearly and quickly based on energetic reality.
So
And that's
let me interject.
Sure.
Is it a question? Is it truly a question of processing, or is it a question of alignment to a living principle, which is where gut instinct kicks in? It's alpha omega. I mean, is it a process, or is it a state of instantaneous grace in being?
Well, it's probably both. What you've got to get out of is being directed by fear.
Yes.
As soon as you're directed by fear, you're not gonna do what your spirit wants to do.
Right. Right. Good. Very good. Okay. Talk about who, because I want to bring this conversation back to, in a sense, to the angelic seeding, the true human, the truest aspect of the Atman incarnate, which is the angelic aspect or seeding in the human. Talk about
which I call spirit.
What's that?
Which I call spirit.
Which you call spirit. Talk about who we are foundationally and how we are to function as a species in a world of controlling philosophies.
Well, at this point in time, the spirit and the personality of the spirit, because I think we're all uniquely different. I think that we all spirits have a divine intent, which includes a gift and a particular focus of talent and insight. What I found is that very few people ever really get to their divine intent. I mean, there's a lot of examples of people that do, but the ones that don't get distracted by triggered trauma memory, and they end up living lives off track in reaction to whatever the triggered memory is, and they don't understand clear enough what's going on to even be able to deal with it. So the spirit, in terms of the evolved spirit that we all have, but the real question is who's in control? Who's in control that 1 second after something is triggered? That's the issue right there.
Right.
And
right.
if the dragon is if the spirit is not conscious enough to get ahead of that, you will be behind it, and you'll be following the dragon rather than following the spirit.
Beautiful, beautiful. So it has to be said that I love you greatly and have done since I first met you years ago. But it also has to be said that I love your wife more than I love you. No, that's not true. I love you both equiproportionately, okay? But she is a remarkable being and a
Right.
truly remarkable being. And I love her greatly. And I miss her and I miss you. And I'm very much hoping that we can inveigle you out here to the Yucatan. You know, Dr. Nancy Ash is here, Chancellor of our university at the moment, and we've been having wonderful, she's been here for getting on for a month with Swami John, her husband, who's one of my beloveds. And we're scouting now to establish the correct placement for the faculty and the campus of the New Earth University. As soon as that is operational, and I think that by the end of 2023, we'll have some first iteration of the university. I'm really hoping to inveigle you and your missus out here. So bear that in mind, because there's a dragnet coming your way, and I intend to draft you into to the faculty here, because you have so much wisdom, Dean. And you're so incredibly refined in how it is that you've alchemized your, let me call it, living philosophy, which is so expansive. You know, you're just a remarkable soul. And I need and want that to be teaching. And I don't like the word educate or teach, but to inspire so much of your wisdom flame amongst the ever-growing community of New Earth folk all around the world.
Great.
So let's have that conversation, and please speak to your beloved wife and tell her that I have plans for the both of you.
Oh, good. We will love it. Thank you so much, Sacha.
Beautiful. So in closing, how do you feel about Homo sapiens sapien in the year 2020? We're going into 2023. What do you see between now and, let's say, 2030, over the next generational cycle of 7 years? What do you see? What are the biggest changes, emergent changes, that you would expect to see fully manifested within 7 years from now?
Well, right now we're in the middle of Armageddon, and that is what is revealed by the light, and of course that creates chaos. So we're in maximum chaos right now, but it's absolutely essential, because we've been on the dark side of the galaxy for at least 13,000 years, and the dragon has had the wind at its back and has evolved immensely, as we can see. But dark games don't fly in the light. We're headed into the photon belt and the northern hemisphere of the galactic plane, which is a positive energy rather than a negative energy. So I see a lot of hope for what's coming, but it's all based on getting real. You know, those hippies back in the 60s, they all had one common thing that they said was the solution to mankind, and it was get real, man. And that's what's happening right now. And they're getting real in terms of money. They're getting real in terms of politics. They're getting real in terms of health and medicine. It's all about getting real.
Very good. So let's do that together. Let's get real together. Okay, I rather suspect this is the first of a number of conversations that we're going to have, because I know that the audience, the Lazarus members, are going to love this conversation. So there's definitely further conversations to be had here. And it might be a good thing at some point to do a segment live where you also just interact and do Q&A. Have we published any of your papers within the New Earth University?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean, there might be a couple of general things, but no,
Okay, well, let's take this forward if we can. And of course, I'm putting you on the spot right now, but with the New Earth, forgive me, with the Lazarus Journal. So let's speak about that and publishing some of your work there, and then extending that through to the New Earth University as a resource. I'd be deeply grateful.
Great.
Good stuff. Well, I'm very, very happy to have seen you, and I reached through this odd digital screen and give you a big kiss and a big hug, and send my very best to Christy, please.
Yes. Well, the same to you, Sacha. I'm looking forward to whatever we develop in the future, and look forward to coming to Mexico.
God bless you, Dr. Allen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.